Welcome everyone to Coffee Conversation. It's so good to have you all here. My name is Nathan Beard and I'm the Assistant Curator here at Dunedin Fine Arts Center. Filling in today for Diane Van Dusen, who has bravely guided Coffee and Conversation into the virtual realm this year. Today is the March 2021 edition of this monthly series of artist talks presented by the Sterling Society. And today we are honored to have artist Cassia Kite with us. Let's take a moment to just acknowledge that this month marks 1 year that we've been navigating a very difficult 12 months. I don't know about you, but art in general, art making, artist talks, looking at art, and curating art has really been one of the pillars that held my house up this year. So I like to raise my glass to the Sterling Society for their ability to adapt to the situation and continue to offer this outstanding program. Before we speak with Cassia, let's hear a few words from the Sterling Society's president, Ms. Sarah Kessinger.
Good morning, everyone. I am Sarah Kessinger. I'm the president of the Sterling Society, and the Sterling Society is the host for the Coffee and Conversation with the Artist. And welcome, Cassia. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. The Sterling Society is pleased to tell you that our Founders Luncheon that we just held on February the 12th at the Dunedin Country Club Golf Club was held on February the 12th, and we had a very outstanding event. Amazing to all of us because we did not know as we were going along which pile to step on because it was like dodging bullets. But we were inside, outside, and virtually, and it was very successful, and hopefully the last one that we ever have to do like this and have our tables 12 feet apart. I mean, it was just amazing. Our next event is going to be in the fall. So that means that Mother's Day tea will not be in May. So you were actually the first announcement that I've made about that. Okay. So instead of a Mother's Day tea, we will be having a Sterling High tea in September. And I think you will all enjoy it. We have an outstanding speaker that we're looking at right now, and it'll be great. We're proud to have as our sponsor of the Coffee and Conversation, Diane Wheatley Gelati, who was also an integral part of the founding of the Sterling Society back in 2004 and 5 when it was being developed. And then from that came Coffee and Conversation was our very first program that we had. So we thank her for doing this, and I thank you all for being here, and I appreciate it. And Nathan, you're on.
All right, thanks a lot, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Before we get started, I know you all know the rules, but as a reminder, please make sure your microphone is muted so that today's presentation isn't interrupted. I know I've got a few dogs in the background, guard dogs, by the way. Also, if you have questions for Cassie along the way, please type them into the chat box and we'll get to those questions after Cassie has given her presentation. Well, we're very pleased to speak with Cassia Kite today. Cassie is an interdisciplinary artist who created Soundstitching, a multimedia project that transforms color from a hand-stitched image into a musical composition that can be interpreted by a musician and/or performance artist. The result is an organic combination of 3 forms of art in one collaborative, multisensory experience. Cassie has collaboratively produced large-scale work for chamber, ensemble, and dancers using color-coded graphic scores derived from her hand-stitched tapestries. Her work was premiered at the Kaneko in Omaha, Nebraska in July of 2017. She's been featured as an experimental composer and visual artist in music festivals, museums, and universities. Cassie has been awarded Artist in Residence at the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts in 2018 and the Hambidge Creative Residency Program in 2019. She's a recipient of the Paul J. Smith Excellence in Fibers Award from the Fiber Art Network 2018 and the Dixon Ticonderoga Award of Excellence from the Florida Art Education Association in 2019. Cassie was born in Auburn, Nebraska. She earned a BFA in painting and sculpture and a Bachelor of Science in Art Education from Northwest Missouri State University in 2003. She completed her Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction from the University of Florida in 2010. Currently, Cassie is a visual art instructor in the Fine Arts program at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, and resides in Sarasota, Florida. Welcome, Cassie.
Thank you so much. I just have to give you a little information. I just had a huge canvas delivery to my house, and the dog is in the studio, so you might hear him bark a little bit, but we're on the tail end of that delivery, so I apologize. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share with your community, and I appreciate having the opportunity that Sterling Society has presented, and I'm excited to share. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started if that's okay. What you see should be a quilt on the screen here. And I believe really that this is where my whole sound stitching journey really started. And so I wanted to start with this image. This is a baby quilt that I made from my father's old work shirts. He is a farmer in Nebraska. And this was the very first piece I've ever made from any kind of fiber art, thread, sewing. And I really just, while I was pregnant in 2012-13, I took the opportunity to take a break from painting and just play, really. I loved the tactile experience I had in doing this. And so I thought to myself, well, if I can make a quilt, self-taught, no previous fiber education whatsoever. Let's see if I can, next. There we go. Okay. I started looking around the house at works that I had, and I thought, well, if I can stitch a quilt, maybe I'll play around and stitch from some of my drawings that I had. And so you see this little doily, paper doily. It was like something I had from teaching middle school, and it was just laying around the house. And so I decided to play around with just thread in general. And I really liked, again, the tactile changeover from one form to another. And so I thought, well, if I can do that with my drawings, then I can do this with maybe my paintings that had color. And then this is really where this all started. On the left is a painting. It's down by Brackenbridge. This is a place that is about 3 miles from my home. It's a significant road that I would travel down in youth. My father traveled down in youth. And so I thought, well, I'll just take a chance and start playing around with color and thread. So that being said, this was probably near the end of my pregnancy. And if you've ever heard stories about artists having like that moment where something happened that they can't forget, the beginning of works and whatnot, this was that moment for me. I went home, I was like 36 weeks pregnant. And my friend, Beth von Bergen-Strong, was trying to build her portfolio for photography. And she said, I really want to get some maternity photos. And I thought, oh man, I'm so big. I'm like, this is not my thing. But she said, well, just pick a spot on the farm and we'll get some photos taken there. Like, where is it a spot on the farm that's important to you? And I thought, well, my grandparents' home. So the house behind me, my father was born in, my grandfather was born in, my great-grandfather built. So we have generational farm roots there. And this house in particular was important because we live about a quarter mile down the road from this structure. And I remembered having the memory of my grandmother. She was older, but she was just really wanted me to learn how to play the piano. And I didn't take to the piano, but I have those memories of walking over and hearing this beautiful sound of the piano coming from this structure. And it was, I think, before I had the terminology and the vocabulary to understand, it was a very surreal experience as a child. Sound carries forever. And I was telling her this story and it just hit me. I said, I've been stitching these places, if I could somehow tie my paternal grandmother, which she plays the piano, with my maternal grandmother, which was a quilter, that would be something, that would be, it just never left me. That thought never left me. So when I got, and here's part of the history here too. So that's my grandmother. in the upper left-hand corner. And there's the piano in that structure that I would play around on. I just never took to musical composition in the way that I think everyone else possibly sees it. So instead, I went into the band in middle school in the drum section and enjoyed music that way. But after 8th grade, I went on into the visual arts in high school. So this really shows some history here with my grandmother. So this is that house. I had already stitched it on canvas because that was the next step. I thought, well, if I can do this on paper, which paper was really hard once you put your needle through, that hole's there. And it's the same with gessoed canvas, which this is the first piece I did on canvas. And as you can see, the drawing over on the right-hand side, that's a mistake. I did not take into consideration the stretcher bar behind. So I would, my first part of the process is I would draw them out and just go from photography, or this one in particular is basically from memory of what the house looked like when I was younger. So I get back from Nebraska and Nina is born, and my husband and I, Tim Yeager, he's a painter. He's the director and chief curator at the Ringling College of Art and Design for the galleries there on campus. And so he's sitting on the floor painting this piano, and it was through the Sarasota Keys project with the Arts and Cultural Alliance of Sarasota that they had this project where they said, we'll bring these pianos to your house, you can paint them, they're going to put them out into the public. And again, still thinking about this idea that I had between connecting the stitching and sound and whatnot, here was an opportunity to actually have a piano in my house. And I look back now and I think, there's those weird times in your life when things just happen and they really are significant. And this is definitely one of them, because I didn't have a piano in my home. And so having the piano there, I thought, well, okay, let's really play around with this and start kind of researching color and sound. And now I have this tool in my home. So this is an original color scale. And what happened was I researched color and sound, and I found a lot of scientific research and information, and from infrared light to ultraviolet, and the color of red was centrally located and often accommodated with C. And I thought, this is not for me. This is not what I just had no time and no interest in the scientific. And so I really looked at the content, which was all Nebraska based at the time, as to what colors were going to be in my range. And so I thought, I'm just going to sit down and I'm just going to notate a color per key. And I knew that I wanted to use all the keys as much as possible. So I put green as C, which was, green in the landscape, and then A and B, which are blue and brown, because I knew Nebraska had those colors that would probably force me to use the keys in the center of the octave. I'm going to apologize. I have no music background other than my middle school experience, and it definitely wasn't in anything but percussion on the snare drum. So if I'm using made up terminology, which is to myself, I apologize. But this was the original color scale that I came up with. And I knew with my color background as an artist and a painter, I wanted to place the colors next to each other so that I would eventually be forced to use those black keys, of which I had no clue what they did. So I would make sure that the tertiary colors could be used in the traditional color wheel eventually. So I had now this color notation process in my mind. And the next thing was, well, how was I going to read the image? So what am I going to do with that? And so I thought, well, I read left to right, top to bottom, so let's just go with that. And so you'll see with my eye, I'll look through the piece, and then I notate those colors into a specific order of which I see the colors. So this is what I call a color map. Oftentimes the color maps are easiest for me to actually play on the piano for myself. This down here, which was the kite house, again, these are all the notes in the specific color of which they're to be played on the piano after the compositional element is completed, which this is my handwritten translation. So I take the color map, and I place those colors into what I look at as sheet music. The element of time doesn't exist. The stems don't exist. Again, that's not necessarily my comfortable language for music. It's more just about the placement of color in tandem with the piece. And so then I learned that in speaking with some composer friends, they said, Cassia, some people aren't going to be able to read this. So I found out that there is Finale, which is kind of like Photoshop for music composition. And I had to teach myself how to use that and go in and plug in the notes into the program so that they could become engraved. And then also it has a playback feature, which is amazing because then I can actually hear what it sounds like on a violin or a trumpet, because I obviously don't know how to play those instruments. So that being said, I put together this film in 2015, and I'd like to play it if it will play. I made this through the Ringling College of Art and Design's teacher program. I was trying to better myself on how to use technology in the classroom. And so this entire film was made on an iPad. So it's a little archaic and outdated, but I also realized I didn't have the vocabulary to really talk about what it was that was going on in my head. And so I really needed a way to communicate my process. So I'd like to play this for you. It's only about 2 minutes long. It will recap a lot of what you've seen. So let me know, and please, Nathan, let me know if it doesn't come out. Okay, so, okay.
I do not consider myself a musician as I am not classically trained. I'm interested in creating a dialogue between two different forms of art by translating color into sound that's inspired by my familiar imagery from my family farm. Soundstitching is an experimental, interdisciplinary, and integrative project that gives a voice to a form of art that has not previously been able to perform. The process allows for a representational image to have its own unique song associated with it, while giving a traditional form of art, such as hand stitching, another way to communicate. I received piano lessons at a very young age from my paternal grandmother, Evelyn Rosetta Harbison Kite, who taught me how to read music. I played the drums and was a member of the percussion section in my middle school band until high school directed me to the visual arts. In an attempt to connect my visual history with my love of music and folk art, I use hand-stitched imagery to compose a song that is, in essence, created from the collaboration of the hand-stitched image with a color scale that is designed to fit the piano in the key of C major scale. The hand-stitched threads are read from left to right, top to bottom, and are organized into a color map pattern. The color map is used to create a methodical line drawing to show the order in which the colors are to be played on the piano. The color map and the line drawing can both be used to compose the hand stitching's song in collaboration with the color scale. Then I use those color maps and I write the music. Soundstitching provides a multimedia platform that unifies visual art and music. The process allows me to communicate through a folk art-esque approach to creation as I experiment through the process of composing music through a hand-stitched image.
So I hope that that helps to, it's a little old, it's from 2015, but I still find it's easier for me to play that than to try to explain it sometimes. So I hope that helped a little bit. In 2016, so after that, my mother said, oh, you're never going to guess what they did with the Old Howe Church. And the Old Howe Church used to be about 2.5 miles from my house as well. I said, what'd they do? She said, well, there's a couple named George and Eva Newbert that they've moved it to Brownville, and they have an amazing folk art collection, and you should go see it because Arlen's quilt is in there. And Arlen Holtus is an old friend of mine. He's no longer with us. He was an amazing craftsman, would make wood whittle and fiber works. And I said, well, I'm going to just have to go visit his quilt and go check it out. And so I did. And I walked in and there was a very large man sitting in a chair and in a suit. And I was the only person in there. And I said, I'd like to see Arlen's quilt. And so we started talking and he asked me what I did. And so I thought, well, I don't know you. I'm going to practice on talking about sound stitching and we'll just see where this goes. So I said, well, I do this thing called sound stitching, and tried to explain it to him, and he listened, and he, listened. And at the end of our conversation, as I was leaving, he said, have you ever thought about Kaneko? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, June Kaneko is a ceramicist, so I'm not sure what that means. And maybe I just really failed at communicating what sound stitching was. So I go home and I was like, Kaneko, it's nothing to do with ceramics, but I Googled it and up pops this amazing website about this organization. And I said, I believe that's the next slide. So yes, there's the Kaneko. It's located in Omaha. And so on the website, there wasn't, I just thought, well, this is great, but is this open? So I messaged the info and I said, I'm sorry, but I came across this man and he said that I should look into are you open? Is this, is this a museum? What is this? And the next morning I woke up to an email that says, is sound stitching yours? And I said, well, yes. How soon can you get here? And I said, I'll be there by 11. So I was able to go up to Omaha and present the 3 only works that I had and talk with them. And they said, well, we'll talk to our board about this, because their whole mission at Kaneko, which is creativity begins with an idea, seeing things differently. Our purpose is exploring the creative process, how a new idea is born into the arts, sciences, and philosophy. There's no restriction for creative activity. Imagination has complete freedom. Supporting and promoting freedom and creativity is Kaneko's mission. I have never come across a place like this in my entire creative realm since. So I worked with Kaneko and they included me in their Kinetic exhibition the following year, which presented the world premiere of sound stitching. So I worked with them. We came up with the concepts and the ideas behind what it was I was trying to communicate. And I'm so very thankful. And so we came up with this sound stitching statement. And then also my mission has grown throughout the process of working with individuals. So you can find all this information on my website too, but really sound stitching mission is to create experiences that connect everyone, all inclusive, educational opportunities for performances, and also for underserved areas of communities, which is really, really important to me. So in that step of the process, I photographed Kaneko that day when I was up there. And after that conversation with them, I got to a point where I think I just had hit a point where I got in my father's truck and I cried, because I felt like someone had actually heard me. And I've been living in this virtual art world. So I was now thrown into this weird place and I couldn't talk about it. And all the people that I knew that I'd normally communicated with, well, they didn't know anything about music. And so with that, what ended up happening is a year later, they partnered me with Omaha Under the Radar Music Festival as an experimental composer. Dr. Stacy Bareilles is in the right-hand upper photograph. She's an amazing composer with the Omaha Conservatory. So I worked with her for a year. We also worked with the Chicago Academy for the Arts, which is the center photograph, which the students were able to come down. And then also through the Soundry project that she has there with Kaneko, which is all experimental music. She teaches classes there and work with those individuals to make the sound portion come to life. And then the dance troupe seen below, TBD Dance Collective, is an amazing 14-woman ensemble. I think they might have even grown since then to work with. And really the part about working with them was the narrative. Like, they are in-house dance and respected with Kaneko. They do a lot of projects. So what did this place mean to them? And it was really open-ended for what they wanted to do to perform the piece. Here's the exhibition. I worked relentlessly for that whole year, 12 new works. And for me, the enjoyment I get is seeing people interact with the work. So here's this participatory, again, sense where I present the music with each piece that I have interpreted myself, which to me is just play, really. But it's always fun to see exhibition spaces being actually used instead of just looked at. Dr. Stacy Bareilles, this is what she had to say about it. Again, you can read that. I believe this is on my website, but I always love to get feedback from collaborators. I know nothing about composition other than what I just know. Hopefully that makes sense, but it's always a learning process for me to talk with the people that I work with to gain some kind of insight as to what it is that they've done with the work. This piece, Fiber Art Now and the Fiber Art Network, I am so absolutely humbled to still to this day have received an award through their organization by the late Paul J. Smith. Paul J. Smith was the director emeritus of the American Craft Museum, which is now the Museum of Art and Design in New York. And it's hard to read sometimes, but in viewing the impressive range of work accepted for Fiber Art Now, I selected the innovative installation Konecko Soundstitching by Cassia Kite for this year's award. Her very original creation that combines textile craft skills and music composition, creating music scores resulting in performance is, in my opinion, a pioneering new concept. For me, fiber artists who successfully explore new works that bridges textile art with other disciplines can offer an important focus that deserves to be honored. This was the first time where I actually won an award and monetarily as well. So I was very humbled and excited about just being thrown into this craft world, which I think is interesting because, you know, in the past and some of my experiences, people have always thought the word craft was just your grandma's art. And let me tell you something, that world is amazing. It really is. It's been fun to cross, again, the borders, not just in interdisciplinary between music and dance, but also in the world of art with everything being so labeled these days. So I was greatly honored with that. Everything goes back to home. This was my very first real Konecko. It was a big year between 2017 and 18. Things were happening so fast. I did a small collaboration with my hometown, basically Brownville as well, and had a little exhibition at the Schoolhouse Art Gallery. Carrie Allen is in the lower right-hand corner. I hope you can see her. She has since departed. She taught my father and me both in the literary world of high school, and I really worked with her to collaborate. This is Lily Summerlin. She's a self-taught violinist, which was really fun to work with because on this next slide, you'll see the notation that and then of course you can read some of her experiences here. I get great joy out of working with people and seeing what their mind does with what my mind has already done. So it's really, and even seeing her marks on the paper, it's just completely enjoyable for me selfishly to see, but also to hear what it is that they've learned through their own process. Moving on to Museum of Fine Art. I was very fortunate to be included in the first iteration of Skyway, which is a collaborative exhibition across all, and I know, Nathan, you're familiar with that, all the museums, the Ringling, the Museum of Fine Art, let's see, Tampa Museum. I think they've added now the University of South Florida's Contemporary, I apologize. But
that's right.
These four entities, this curatorial group has come together, which is amazing and astonishing, where they've kind of combed out and they take this call and they work with the artists from our community. And I was very fortunate to work with new Renaissance artist Elizabeth A. Baker, Kelly Herman, and Helen Hansen French to make this work come to life on stage. This work was created from Longboat Key Center for the Arts, which is no longer with us. But this was the artist group that I was with at the time we were provided a residency. And Nina was so young, I was exhausted. I'd like to say I enjoyed the residency opportunity, but it was a struggle because I was so used to being in home, making work with my family around. So it was something that I communicated to the choreographer. And I said, you know, this piece, as great as it is, it was a hard piece. And Helen Hansen French is a mother, and she says, I know exactly what you're talking about. So their take on the performance was a little bit more in reverse and slow motion, and you'll be able to see that here. I'm just going to play a little bit. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this will show you the process. And what you're hearing is me playing the piece myself, but you'll see the performance here soon. And if you don't mind, I'm not obviously going to play the whole thing because some of the performances are nearing 25 minutes long. So you can find that whole performance on my website, which I'll share here later on. But I was very thankful for the opportunity. This was the first time in a museum atmosphere that I was able to exhibit the work and have a performance at the same time. So moving on to 2018, I knew Kaneko was going to be a big deal. And so I approached my alma mater. I happened to run into Dr. John, the president. So, I've been very active with the university even since I left and stayed in contact with my professors. And he said, well, if this is going to happen, why don't you get a hold of Dr. Katie Strickland, who's the head of the fine arts department? And I said, okay. And so in June, before Kaneko happened and before everything else happened, I went over and she made time for me, thankfully. And lo and behold, she's also the head of bands. So I thought, oh gosh, I hope she understands what I'm going to tell her. And she did. So I was able to partner with them and work with the students and professors, which is where I really wanted to be as well on the educational platform. And so I stitched two images. The one on the left hand is the actual fine art building, and my mother got her degree there too. So it's near and dear to me. And on the right hand side, football really helps to financially support the university, and it's been a long running history of great performances. And so I wanted to find an image of which I was able to. Lee Corley was a dear friend of mine and an avid photographer. So I used one of his images that had the team, the dance troupe, and the steppers, and then also the band on the field. So my collaborators are all below, the students and professors that I worked with, and student composers. And this is an example of James Cookenham was a student composer that I worked with, Dr. Jiwon Cho. She performed it, and this is Duluth Fine Arts Building. And again, I'll only play the first part for you to hear. And I was very happy. It was a great experience, this piece. And again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut it short. I'm trying to watch the time, but that's just another example. And this is what Dr. Strickland had to say about our collaboration. It was full circle for me to be able to give back. We received a very large grant from the Heartland Foundation called the Collaboration Grant that funded all of this. And it was just such an amazing opportunity to be able to give back to my where I started with the visual arts in college. So, and then these, again, the professors that I was able to work with were excited because it was so new. It was, my intellectual property really. And so to be able to do something, the university really pushed it and supported me completely, which I'm very grateful for. In the upper right-hand corner is George and I at the Flatwater. And in the lower right-hand corner is me and my classroom at IMG Academy. They came down and they did a whole article about the entire process, of which can be seen on my Instagram and also my website if you're curious to see that. And they do a great job of explaining everything. Participatory works. So this is at the Museum of Nebraska Art, which was on my list since I was like 18. I said to myself, I'm going to have a work on the wall in here. And lo and behold, my 40th year, it finally happened. And I got to share the stage with my idol, Sheila Hicks, who's also Nebraska, historically lived in Hastings. And I've been so fortunate to have contact with her. I just absolutely love her work. She's a pioneer in the fiber world, and look her up if you're not familiar. She's amazing. My daughter, Nina, standing there. I really like participatory work. And this is one that was featured there for that exhibition. And I want to show you what this means, really. I felt such a desire to involve everyone in the process. And so I put up the engraved musical notation for this particular piece. And here's an example of the public enjoying it on the toy piano. But I don't have any measures in there. So it's not your traditional music. And I just really enjoy seeing, again, the public interact with the work. I got into residency in Nebraska City, the Kimmel Harding residency, Nelson residency. And so with that, I really wanted to take the concept of participatory work. And I realized with what you just saw was still, it wasn't all inclusive, because if you couldn't read music, you couldn't participate. And that really bothered me. And so I thought, well, why don't I move into soft sound sculptures where I could record sounds from some of these sites and provide an opportunity for people to touch and come in contact with the work. So the lower right-hand corner, you'll see this device that I made, which is what I call a soft sound sculpture. And there are previously recorded sounds on each one of these devices. And then when you touch the work, when you touch the sculpture, you'll hear the sounds coming from. And this shows that process. While in residency, as you can see, I document pretty much close to everything I do. It's, people are curious, and I think it's the educator in me that wants to educate on process, to show, this is how this works. And as an artist, you need to evolve. And if along the way someone finds inspiration from your work that helps you get to that evolution, then I think that that's very important. Sharing and collaborating is really important with the work. So again, these are fun, those little devices that make those sounds and the little teddy bears. Well, these are the same things. So I found these devices and I reprogram them to make the sounds that I want them to. And then here we go. They're real faint sounds with this particular piece, so you might not be able to hear it on. Birds are coming up next, I think. from around the, anyway, so I went to the Mayhew cabin that I stitched, and I recorded sounds taken from the inside and outside and around that specific place, and brought that into the exhibition space for people to experience. So I've made a couple of these. They go with all the pieces. I've made some art quilts that communicate my color maps and color scales. The Mayhew cabin's on the left, the south side of the Kite House is upper right, and the Flatwater Folk Art Museum. This is all work on the Flatwater Folk Art Museum. These are programmed into making sounds from the folk art objects on the inside. So it educates what's also in the collection housed in this particular space for people to enjoy. And I've done this one in particular. These are sounds from memories that I have from inside the Kite House. And you'll hear everything from a train to cattle walking through mud, birds, the grandfather clock. I did chores with my father growing up, so there are sounds that I would take from working with that. So Lincoln Logs, played with Lincoln Logs as a little kid. My dad's set from when he was a child. So I'm interested in sound as well. As you can see, it's not just what the work makes. I was able to get into the Hambidge, which is an amazing residency in North Georgia. Mary Hambidge was a self-taught weaver, and she created this community. And so I was very fortunate to get to come spend time there for 2 weeks in the summer of 2019. And it was from that I took another participatory turn, and I thought, well, I'm curious as to what the residents here can possibly make and what that might sound like. So I put this little canvas, I think it's like a 6x6, with the original color threads up in the main house where we would all meet for dinner and see what they would come up with within the 2 weeks time. And this is what they created. And I really enjoyed allowing other people to experience what it's like to actually hand stitch, because believe it or not, so many people don't know anything about it, which is great. I didn't when I started. So being able to introduce that is important to me, to educate others as well. So Nebraska Influences. I love history. I love the opera houses, you know, how they faded out when the moving picture came in and these spaces became empty, but they had so much going on before. This is in Falls City, Nebraska, the Galen Theater. I was able to meet with the owner and take a tour of what's actually on the inside, and you'd be so surprised all the amazingness. I was able to work with Kenneth Bay on, he performed on his Baroque lute, which I'd never even seen before. And this piece now resides in the Merle Stalder collection there. I'm very fortunate. Again, my home, my family history. This one won an award through the FAEA, which is Florida Art Education Association, the Dixon Ticonderoga Award. The photo on the left is my great-grandfather. My grandfather is on my great-grandmother's knee. And so I decided to stitch, his name is Howard, in this piece in honor of him. So again, I'm still very familially connected to my Nebraska roots and the landscapes and whatnot. So this piece, I document everything. I've been documenting my father since 2006. He doesn't know what I'm doing. I do chores with him. So here's a little clip of other things that I use as inspiration. And I've just used my phone to record most of this. So me driving the tractor and participating in the chore process. But you'll see here, the content of the cattle, which will play into sound stitching. So from photography that I take as well, I, you know, print, digitally, paint. And here's the process of stitching this particular piece. Working with organic subject matter is a lot of fun. And then with this particular piece, I used crayons that was just available at the time. Again, the same process that you have seen. And then this piece I was able to just play by myself. It's a really beautiful piece, but it has not been performed. So it's just. So again, these are all on my website. I'm extremely excited to be partnering with the National Willa Cather Foundation out in Red Cloud, Nebraska for 2022. It's a literary connection that I've deeply loved and I was educated on early on in life. And so I am currently stitching the places in Red Cloud that influenced her work. And in the hopes that by 2022 June conference, that we will be able to have performances at all of these places for everyone to enjoy. And I'll be looking for collaborators for that through their institution. They've done some amazing work out there. So I'm very happy to be working with them in the future. For Florida, of course, we've got architecture in Florida that's amazing. This is the Cocoon House, Paul Rudolph and Ralph Twitchell. I've since taking the tour and love the history and the story with them, I've started stitching it. So this is in progress. It's not finished. I'm very curious as to how one architect would sound like next to another. Like, what does this one sound like compared to a Carl Abbott and whatnot? So I'm just very curious in Florida history and architecture. Also, the Rose Garden, Mabel's Rose Garden at the Ringling Museum, COVID hit. And not that COVID changed my work, but it made me see the world around me differently, more so here focused. In Florida, I was so set with Nebraska. I started going to places that were safe and free and public, and I really had been admiring the roses in the Rose Garden. So I did reach out to the horticulturist Kai at the time, and we partnered together, and he really educated me on everything there is to know about why they're named what they're named and all the different parts of it. So I have visions of performances in the Rose Garden. Hopefully that will happen. I think it'd be beautiful to see what these roses sound like in tandem with each other. Nina, of course, I've been taking her there since she was born. So, and I've come recently into portraiture. I really wanted to test myself. Can I stitch portraiture? And so I started looking at my world and people that have really influenced me. And I'm really excited about this piece. It's not finished. This is a very dear friend of mine. His name is Francis Schwartz. He's a very well-known composer here in town. And I asked him if he would be okay with me stitching his portrait, and he said he'd be honored. So I'm really excited about this. It will be done the end of March. I did not make it in time for his birthday, but I'm really, really excited about this work and bringing honor to the people that, of course, that have really mentored me and continue to. So this is the backside, of course. I'm not ready to reveal the front because he's going to get to see it first. So Florida, Skyway is going to happen again here. I'm really excited. I'll be at the Tampa Museum June 3rd through October 10th, of which work we are still communicating about. I have a meeting actually later today about that. About what I'll be presenting through that collaboration and exhibition. So I'm really excited about it. And then that's about it. I mean, I'm hopefully didn't go over time, and I'm sure there's questions, but I guess at this point, am I supposed to check? It says chat maybe?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Cassie.
Okay.
Wow, fascinating body of work. And I've been a big fan of your work for 4 or 5 years, I think. And I just love the evolution of sound stitching and how you are driven, how the evolution of the series is driven towards, people being to experience it physically, emotionally, visually. So it's just really, really engaging in every way. I love it. Yeah, let's get to some questions here. I know.
So I see Brandon. I think Sarah answered that question in the. I'm really drawn to her poetry, Willa Cather's poetry. Okay, so
we'll just
Brandon,
read it so that everyone.
yeah, Brandon says, I heard the author Willa Cather discussed recently, and I know Cassia has mentioned her in the past. Should I propose this author in my book club? If so, which one? Yes, all of her work. They are really, the University of Nebraska is also working in the women's studies area, which there's a lot of news coming out that's just phenomenal. They are coming across even more new work that's being donated. It's really in the moment and in the time. So Willa Cather's got a lot to give still. And I would definitely, any of her works. I really like April Twilights, which is her little book on poetry. It's a little handy one you can just drag around with you. But of course, My Antonia, is one of my favorites in Song of the Lark. So definitely I would say that. Are you ever unhappy with the music that results from your process? And if so, do you change it? Good question. I don't have any rules when working with people except one. And I very rarely have to say it, but if it's a piece that's about near and dear to me, like my grandparents' home, I say, please don't make this an angry piece. Because sound is amazing, how you can make emotions and you can change that energy from that place into something that it's totally not, which is amazing. But yeah, that's the only, I'm not really ever unhappy because it really just is what it is. You just have to, for once, there's not always an answer. A lot of people are always searching for answers and these labels and people throwing labels. And I just hover outside of all those boxes that you can check to explain yourself. I don't really fall into that. And so I really don't want to limit the music. It's just, it is what it is. It's the energy of one place being transferred into another form for people to experience, really. So I hope that answered your question. Marlise, I think is how you pronounce it. Oh, thank you so much. I saw your collaboration. You did. You saw it at MFA. It was wonderful to have that opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sarah, Cassia, your work is absolutely fabulously creative. Do you still do paintings without fabric? Your talent is far-reaching. Thank you for coming. It's so interesting you say that, because I have a series of works I'm working on right now where my work is taking full circle, where the paintings I'm created are everything having to do with the color maps. And it's, I have just this constant desire to keep redirecting the main idea of what it is that I'm doing here and how many different ways can you communicate one thing into another. So I think I started doing that with the quilts, and then I just still have a drive to paint. So it's a love-hate relationship. You have to make time for each medium, I think. So I hope that answers your question. Those will be within the next 6 months. I'm coming out with some of those. So yeah.
I didn't want to miss this one from Carol Kuzmal.
Okay.
How do you transfer? Carol, we might need your help with this question. How do you transfer from the art to the graphed notes?
So probably from the color maps to the handwritten translations.
Carol, if you want to unmute yourself and
I just don't understand how you get from your stitchery. Do you go up and down and just make a note of how many places each color exists in the art?
It's almost like I comb the tapestry with my eyes, starting from left to right, top to bottom. And so where I see the change in color, like if it's a green thread to a brown thread, then that's the notation. And that I take whatever I'm using, colored pencil or crayon or whatnot, and I basically notate that change in color and give that a note in the piece. I hope that helps. It's a subjective process, but it's my process. So it's however I'm seeing that color through the piece from start to finish.
So, but some columns have 3 colors, some columns only have 1, some columns have several. How does that work?
So if you could imagine, maybe you're looking, say, at the Kite House, And maybe what I can do is go back to that. Can you all still see my presentation? Oops.
Yes.
Okay. So see here, you start here, right? Well, I see the green and then I come up and I'll see the brown, it'll go back to green. So sometimes there'll only be the first note. And then once you get into the heart of the piece, it's going to be more, here's going to be the apex probably, where it just depends on the colors, really. I can't even say that, where you're going to probably have more dots of color in that color map than you would over here, because there's limited color in the first area of section. So I would call them rows really within that color map that are measures to me. Again, I'm using my own terminology, so I apologize if it's not in the educational realm. But that's why you see some of those rows with only 2 or 1 versus 14 to 50 in some of them. So
if you see a long section of green, do you repeat that note? Green, 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 green?
I think it depends on the piece. Really, it's just my notation process is for me. And then the beautiful part that happens is giving all of the components to a composer. And then what the composer does is look through all that and either makes a direct arrangement. And a direct arrangement to me is if they keep the honor of those colors in the order that they're to be played throughout the piece. But I've worked with some composers that are, they just want the color map and that's what they're interested in, and that's okay. So really, when it comes down to some of the pieces that you've been able to see and hear, the composer has worked with the components that I've given them, and they'll be able to explain to you exactly what they've done with the work. Most of them do direct arrangements, which honors the order, but again, it's really about making opportunity and providing opportunity for the composers and musicians and dance troupes to do what it is that they know how to do and feel a part of the process. It is a true collaboration. So
very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Cassie, I really loved the Missouri State project, just for example, hearing the difference between how you play it note by note, which is has a sort of John Cage, or a very raw kind of, one of my favorite bands is Radiohead, and you can find all kinds of stuff online about Tom York and how he composing things in his studio, and then sending that recording to the other band members, who then make their own parts of the song, and then they put it all together, and by the time they're done, there's a skeleton there that you can follow, but it's completely transformed and full and complex, and you got that same sense with the Missouri State project, where I've forgotten the doctor's name, but she, sitting there, she is a professional pianist, and she's, the time of the notes changed, so it was full, and there's a different kind of cohesiveness and a different kind of flow that
it's any time I get to experience, with Kaneko, when that happened, I just, hands down, I think I had quite an out-of-body experience, not to sound weird, but I probably didn't eat for 2 days, because everything that had been in my head for 4 years of this concept, and I knew I believed in it, and I knew if I could envision it, it could happen. And then it happened. And I'm literally at the performances, I'm usually the person in the way back, sometimes just so selfishly enjoying what's going on, because I feel like I might be the only person in the room understanding it, but to see the enjoyment of the people that get to present it, and it's really, I think I get most enjoyment out of seeing others, working and participating in the process. So working with the Northwest Missouri State University, I mean, again, I with Dr. Katie, I was so fortunate she could envision it too. And you never know how these are going to work out until it happens. It's hard for me to talk about work that isn't finished, because until it actually happens, it didn't happen. So I'm extremely fortunate for all the collaborators, because Soundstitching would not be what it is if it had not been for any one of those people that have worked with me. I truly believe that. I can't do what they can do. And I want to provide opportunity, especially in this day and age with COVID. I think the performers have hit it the worst. And if there's something that I can do with my project to provide opportunity for people to perform and to do what it is that they know how to do best, it's giving another platform of opportunity. It really, what might look like and feel like to me sometimes is ego-driven work, because we're all artists and that's one of the things that happens. I would like to think that the process of Soundstitching really provides more opportunity for others than anything else that I've ever created other than what I do in the classroom. It's the same kind of exchange of energy that happens. So was there any other questions? Did I miss anything?
I don't see anything else in the chat. Is there anyone else out there who has any questions? I don't think so. Sarah, do you have anything else to say before we?
I thank you profusely for being here. It was wonderful. What an eye opener. And I think your grandmothers would be very, very proud of you. I think that's just a tribute to them. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate having the opportunity to share. You know, it's been hard. A lot of the exhibitions we had planned for were put off. And so there's been small opportunities, and I'm just so grateful for this one. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Cassie. We'll look forward to seeing your work in Skyway. And I also know that you and your husband, your partner, Tim Yeager, have some work at the Morian.
We do.
Center.
It's a family exhibition. You'll see work by our kids as well. So it's a lot of fun. It's up until March 25th.
Yeah. So if you want to, if anyone wants to get a little taste of the Kite Yeager family,
yeah, and down by Bracken Bridge, that painting and that Soundstitching are on exhibition there as part of that exhibition. So if you're interested in seeing it, that's on view right now. So.
And of course, you mentioned multiple times your website is such a wonderful resource for learning more about your work. So
yes.
Thanks a lot, Cassie. We really appreciate your time and learning so much about your work. And we look forward to seeing you on down the line.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's going to be a good
Nathan,
summer.
Okay.
Yes, Sarah.
This will be shown on YouTube, right?
Yes, and then
great.
this is being recorded, and we're gonna polish it up, and we'll put it on the Dunedin Fine Arts Center YouTube page. For anyone who'd like to see it later, watch it over, share it with your friends and family and fans. The Dunedin Fine Arts Center is open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday. We have some beautiful exhibits right now, and all of our classes are up and running. So if anyone out there wants to learn something new, check out our catalog online at dfac.org. And then our next Coffe and Conversation is in April. This is a monthly series, so it's this second Tuesday of every month. I believe the next date is April 13th, and we will be featuring Brian Volaton, who is an entrepreneur, artist, illustrator, graphic artist, motivator. He's a man of many hats, so we're excited to hear about Brian and his work and his life. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. And we'll thank everyone for coming to Coffe and Conversations, and we'll see you all at the Art Center.
Thank you, Nathan, for doing this today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Have a great day, everyone.